welcome to the Hoop Collective podcast. We talk about the NBA, which we're doing on Sunday evening. Joining us from Las Vegas, Nevada, where he had the pleasure of being in Vegas on the day where they had the hottest temperature in the recorded history of the city by 3 degrees, 120 degrees, Tim Bontemps.
The lucky thing for me is I've been inside doing interviews all day, so I haven't had to deal with the heat. So lucky me.
Joining us from Dallas, Texas, where I'm sure it's not cool, is Ben MacMahon.
Howdy, partners. You know what you need when it's a good 120 degrees outside, a urine-soaked wet blanket. Good thing Bontemps is there.
Hopefully with chilled urine is better in those situations.
I mean, Jesus Christ.
So Bontemps is covering Team USA for this week. One of the busiest times of the calendar year, to be honest with you, when all this stuff has happened involving all these players' teams. They all get dumped out into the interview room all basically at one time. And, this is the high, I'm comparing it to we could spend half hour comparing it to 1992. It's really not relevant because right now on an international scale, these guys are as bigger newsmakers than in 1992, considering the media landscape. So Bontemps, you've been busy. You spoke to Kawhi Leonard and Joel Embiid. And they have an interesting situation. They're teammates here on Team USA. They're both coming off of injuries, but they are on the sort of quote unquote winning and losing side of Paul George. Kawhi just lost him with the Clippers. Embiid just gained him with the 76ers. And I thought maybe you could take us through the emotions for the two of them when you guys talked about it.
Yeah, I did a sit down with Embiid. That's partially going to run this morning, and we'll have a big story up about what he had to say. And the biggest takeaway from him was sort of what we have talked about over the course of the last year, which is the Sixers were doing this high wire plan of waiting and getting expiring contracts and getting draft picks and not necessarily immediately improving the team as much as possible last season to try to land a big fish this summer when there was ultimately only one real big fish to land in Paul George. And Embiid told me that his patience was tested during that process. He said I'd be lying if I said I wasn't tested from a patience standpoint, and that sometimes you have plans and they work and sometimes they don't. And in this case, he was very happy, obviously, with the way that it played out and with how it came together with getting Paul George with him and Tyrese Maxey, a fit that he said was a fantastic fit, obviously for all the reasons we have talked about on the court. And then there was Kawhi Leonard, who spoke to a group of reporters this afternoon and was asked about Paul George and said didn't want to talk about Paul George. He was trying to focus on Team USA. Did talk a lot about his knee, said he's ready to go, fully able to participate in practice. And then circled back later after leaving to clarify that he didn't have any issue with Paul George or his decision to leave, but that he was trying to focus on Team USA, which was what, in theory, the interviews are supposed to be about. And I will say, Kawhi Leonard is about the most literal player I've ever interviewed in any respect. So I do take him at his word that the interviews were supposed to be about Team USA. He was answering questions about Team USA. And his knee is part of Team USA because he was talking about whether he could actually participate with Team USA. So we will see. He's going to talk again on Tuesday. We will see if he has more to say about it in that setting. But certainly the Clippers brass is all here watching practice. Ty Lue is coaching the team. Kawhi is playing. And Paul George is still hovering over them, even though he's decided to leave.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's pretty clear he ain't thrilled about it. That's obvious. I think the question is, how upset is he about it? And I'm not sure he's going to emote in that way. I'm not sure he's going to relate exactly how he feels about it. So I think you asked to get it on the record. I just don't think it's going to be there. Embiid, did he talk at all about where he thinks the Sixers fit in the East now with obviously the big summer they've had?
Well, I asked him, where do you guys sit in the East? And in very typical fashion, he said, I think we're about the 8th best team in the East. And I said, do you want to give me a list? And then he proceeded to give me a list of basically every team to the point where I said, would you like to include the Hawks and Nets also in front of you? And then I said, look, in all seriousness, where do you guys think you sit in the East? And he gave the answer. He's given to me repeatedly, but I think he believes, which is that if I'm healthy and ready to go in the playoffs, I think we could beat anybody. But it all comes down to health, which, as we know, especially with the Sixers team, with Paul George and with Joel Embiid, it does all come down to health. But I think he sort of told on himself when he talked about how perfect the fit is with Maxey and PG, the fact he's got 2 elite shooters around him, the fact they brought back Kelly Oubre, they got Caleb Martin, they got Eric Gordon, they got Andre Drummond, who's a very good, one of the better backup centers in the league, guy who could spell him when he's not out there. And he also talked about the fact that he thinks that with the group they've got now, he doesn't have to have quite the same load to carry every night, particularly offensively. Said he didn't mind if there's nights when he has 10 or 15 points because they've got Maxey, they've got Paul George. Those guys can fill it up on any given night.
So the guy was averaging 35 last year.
So he's averaging more points than minutes played, right? So like he doesn't think he has to play to quite that same degree. And he actually thinks it might be able to help him stay healthier because he can, he doesn't have to exert quite as much during the season, where he obviously this year, it was basically he, Maxey, and then not much else. So from a scoring standpoint, adding Paul George, a 25-point-a-game scorer like that, it's a much different deal. So yeah, he's clearly excited to be part of Team USA, and, it's feeling good physically. And, this is obviously, Brian has been around this a bunch. Everybody's always very excited to be part of this thing and very excited to talk and like do all the things that come with being part of it, because they're just all excited to be here. And I think that's really been especially amplified with this group because it is such a star-studded group. At one point, Bam Adebayo was asked about Team USA trying to like reestablish itself as the best team on the planet, sort of show the gap between everybody else. And he said, have you looked at who's playing on the court? Like he said, I'm not trying to team, man. Yeah. He's like, I'm not trying to disrespect anybody else, but this is an incredible group of players and we want to go out there and beat everybody by 40,
we'll see if they're able to. Something interesting actually happened on Sunday. They had a scrimmage between the senior team and the select team, which it's not the most talented select team in history, but the senior team won. And I'm going to tell you that at least 2 or 3 times that I've covered training camp, luckily it's you this time, Bontemps, and not me, the select team won the first scrimmage. In fact, I actually suspected before Tokyo that Popovich wanted the select team to win.
Well, just as a quick aside about Team USA select team, the most interesting guy I think on that team is Cooper Flagg, the projected #1 pick in next year's draft, going to Duke. By the way, doesn't turn 18 until December. He was born December 2006. LeBron was in the 4th season in the league, the year he went to the NBA Finals, and Kevin Durant was a freshman at Texas. And he's playing against them in a scrimmage, which is a rather remarkable thing. I talked to Cooper for a minute. He admitted he was surprised that he got picked. He's the first college player to be part of this since Doug McDermott and Marcus Smart 11 years ago. It's obviously been a minute. And those guys were like 21. This kid is 17 and didn't look out of place. Like he's got a chance to be an awfully good player.
So on one hand, they're off to a good start. On the other hand, a video clip I saw today had Peyton Pritchard guarding LeBron. So I'm not sure. Right. I'm not sure how that strategy is going to play out.
I mean, listen, it's a ridiculous assemblage of talent on Team USA. And Kevin Durant is got a calf strain. His day-to-day, everybody's saying it's not a big deal. He was certainly walking around doing interviews, looked fine yesterday. And Jason Tatum has missed the first couple of days for just for some excuse reasons. I think he's supposed to be back.
It might have something to do with him signing a $314 million contract.
Yeah, I think it was something beyond.
He hadn't put the trophy down yet. He's got probably a drink in one hand and the trophy in another.
Why? Listen, if he's got his contract in his pocket, I'm going to congratulate him on all parties. Do it, man.
He has been taking the trophy around, but I think it was something beyond that too. But he's supposed to be back for practice on Monday, I believe.
Yeah. So a couple of things. Kawhi said in his interview that you were at today that his knee wasn't really right until 2 weeks ago, but now is okay, which I didn't like hearing that. He did look good in the scrimmage today. I think he hit like 4 threes in the part that the media was able to see.
Were you
But
watching the scrimmage from home?
I have people.
Okay.
Oh,
Okay.
not including
Uh,
you.
Not including me,
He was
clearly.
too busy to talk to me. He was way too busy to talk to me.
That's true.
So I mean, obviously looked okay in the scrimmage, but that he wasn't okay really until 2 weeks ago was, I don't know. I guess it's maybe not surprising, but he talked about how it's his journey. It's what he's sort of always going to deal with, and Clipper fans certainly are used to hearing that.
Yeah, as they are paying 50 million, as they're about to pay him 50 million a year for the next 3 years, and he hadn't been able to finish a playoff run healthy over the last few years. It's a tough deal. As far as like him not wanting to talk about Paul George, like I'm not going to read anything into Kawhi,
I
not
agree.
say much to the media. Like when does he ever?
I agree.
Uh, but like it's all part of it. Like the whole Clippers thing. And look, Paul George is a guy who other stars want to play with. Embiid's clearly ecstatic about it. So is Kawhi Leonard. That's why the Clippers still owe so much to Oklahoma City for the original deal, because that's the leverage they had. It required Paul George to get Kawhi Leonard. So, Kawhi kind of, I don't want to say created that mess for himself, but, the reason they paid so much for Paul George is because it was contingent on, that was the part of the deal to get Kawhi.
Listen, Kawhi looked out for himself in the winter when he took the 3-year contract. I'm sure he wasn't actively trying to hurt Paul, but he looked out for himself. I mean, there's been varying degrees of reporting and stuff about just how much Paul George knew. But I can tell you the day that it happened, I think it took Paul George and his reps off guard, and certainly the terms. And so Paul had to do what he had to do.
Yeah.
And I think players understand that as much as they may be upset about it. I don't think there's going to be any personal hard feelings.
Players always appreciate business decisions when it comes to money.
Bontemps, Embiid is eligible to sign a 3-year, $190 million extension after July 18th. He's going to be in the middle of prep for Team USA. I would be stunned if he doesn't ask for it, and I'd be stunned if Philly doesn't give it. But what are your thoughts on where that's headed?
I did not. I've not spoken to Joel about that recently. However,
I will ask him on or about July 18th when we're in London.
Yeah, no, I've talked to Joel about it in the past, and he thought it was an interesting idea when I brought it up to him. And
But he did.
Yeah, it's.
Would you like 190 million? Yes, I
could he
would.
sign? Could he sign a 4-year extension?
I thought it was
extension?
3, but
I don't know. Either way, it's a lot. It's a long extension for a lot of money, and I suspect Joel Embiid is going to be, as I've said for a while. I thought the way this season went, I thought with the way Tyrese Maxey emerged, I thought the questions about Joel's future had pretty much been put to rest, and that he would want to be in Philadelphia long term. I certainly will be stunned if he's not there long term now that Paul George is there. I think
I would say that he wanted to be in Philadelphia long term as long as Daryl Morey delivered this summer. If Daryl had not delivered this summer, it could have there was potential for complications.
Yeah, I agree with
But
that.
Daryl created a situation where he could take a big swing, and he connected. To his credit, he had a ton of pressure on him, and he delivered the biggest name free agent to change teams since Kawhi left the defending champion Raptors and went to the Clippers. So there's no reason. And look, Daryl obviously, a lot of his job is to make sure the big fella is happy. And he's done it from a personnel standpoint to this point now. And I would say it would make a lot of sense for Daryl to say, Joel, would you like to sign this massive contract? And if Embiid would, then say, here's the piece of paper.
Yeah, the Maxey development, I think, just gave them a lot more wiggle room because they had a lot more outs because they had a second star. Obviously, getting PG, I think, cements it. But certainly, yeah, they had a high wire act they had to deliver on, and it's full credit to them. They got the best guy they could get. getting Caleb Martin was a big deal. 4-year, $32 million deal. Could have got a lot more money from the Heat before free agency. Elected to go to free agency. Ends up getting a bunch less, but slides into what should be, I think, a starting role in Philly. People on Twitter freaked out when I said he'd slide into their starting power forward spot because he's 6'6" or whatever, but that's the opening on the roster. They're going to be a little small, at least for now. And I suspect they're eventually going to sign KJ Martin, Kenyon's son, to a balloon 1-year deal that sort of will act as a human trade exception to further add to the roster. But they've got, they've done about as well, I think, as they reasonably could have.
KJ Martin is their own free agent. That's why they can.
Yes, and there's some various cap mechanics that can give them a bunch of money. But getting Oubre back, signing Caleb Martin, getting Andre Drummond, getting Eric Gordon as a minimum player, like they did about as good as they could have done so far.
All right, so LeBron has spoken the last couple of days. Bontemps, he also sat down with our Dave MacMahon, and LeBron signed a 2-year, $104 million, $103 million contract or earlier in the week. He left like $1 million and change on the table in this year. He signed a 2-year deal. He has a player option for next year. I see a lot of people saying, well, he left $3.5 million on the table. We'll see about that because he can opt out of his contract next year and get that money back, or he could actually take less money. But he was going to leave more on the table. The Lakers couldn't get anything done. And in his interview with MacMahon, Bontemps, at times after the Lakers have had inactivity in transaction cycles, particularly at the trade deadline, LeBron has, been a little salty about it. And considering that he was like, I'll leave this money on the table and here's the guys I want you to get, and they didn't get him, I was going to be anxious to see what he said. And he basically shrugged his shoulders and said, well, you got to have somebody, you can't always make a move just because you want to make a move. And we'll give it the old college try and make it the best we can, which is the reality. But he, kind of let him, not only let him off the hook, but certainly didn't aim any targets on the Laker front office.
Look, I thought the most interesting thing that LeBron said in his public media session on Saturday was when he got asked about, on a couple different occasions. I followed up with him when he didn't answer it, when Dan Wojcicki asked him and somebody else asked later about his expectations with the roster going forward, assuming they don't make any changes. He essentially said, I'm going to show up to work every day and we're going to do the best we can. It wasn't, we're going to be a top 4 team. It wasn't, I think we can win a title. It wasn't, I don't think we can contend. It was, we're going to do the best we can, essentially, which I think is LeBron very correctly, in my opinion, level setting about as low as he possibly can, the expectations, because frankly, to me, the ceiling for this team is that they're the 6th seed. And it's much more likely they're the 11 or 12 seed than they're the 4 or 5 or maybe even the 6th seed. Because again, as we've talked about a lot, he and AD played 140 some games last year, and they were stuck in the play-in all year. And if either one of those guys misses any more time than that, the way the West is right now, I do not see them finishing better than that, certainly, and could very well be a lot worse.
Well, just look at a couple of teams in front of them, you could argue got worse, Denver and the Clippers, but they didn't get worse in such a way that you think they're going to come rushing back at them.
And the Clippers probably. But Denver,
maybe.
no.
Never know, and the Grizzlies could be right back in the thick of things. Like the West is not going to be weaker.
Right. Well, and the 2 teams right behind him in the standings were New Orleans and Sac, and both of them added. They weren't all-stars last year, DeJounte Murray and DeMar DeRozan, but they added all-star level players. I mean,
and the Warriors got better, I think, too.
That's debatable, but I agree with you.
It's interesting.
Well, we're going to talk about the Warriors in a minute, so we'll say that.
LeBron, though, he did the Lakers a favor. He took a little bit less. The actual numbers of 101.36 mil, and it's just enough for them to stay out of the second apron and all the ramifications that come along with that. And, LeBron explained, hey, when you're in a relationship, basically, you make compromises. Also, hey, part of the compromise, LeBron doesn't want that future first-round pick frozen.
Well, listen, I enjoyed this analogy. I enjoyed this analogy on many levels. Dan Wojcicki from the LA Times asked him today, why did you take less money? Why was it important to get the team out of the second apron? He then gives this long answer about how he's been married for a long time, And sometimes you have to make decisions that or make things work for everybody. And like, I'm checking it right now because our guy Bobby Marks is on top of all of these things. By taking this money, the Lakers are about $45,000 below the second apron. Like they are below the second apron, but it's not like they have flexibility to do a whole lot.
No, but the future first round pick will not be frozen. So if it comes a time when he wants to be able to apply pressure to be aggressive in the trade market, they can't say, "Oh, well, we're over the second apron. What are we going to do?"
I understand. My point is that, like,
there's back scratching here. They drafted Bronny. He got his 4-year guaranteed contract. Like LeBron, okay, hey, I appreciate you taking care of my son. You're going to put some.
By the way, Bronny also got a $500,000 advance.
Well, that's nice. I'm sure.
Yeah, and
it helps to get set up. You know, your first job. You know, you got to buy clothes and furniture.
Is that a raise or a pay cut from his allowance?
well, just to clarify,
probably a pay cut from his NIL.
There was a team option on the fourth year, and I think there was a partial guarantee on the third year just for bookkeeping on him.
Okay.
But my point,
they drafted him. They're investing
for sure
an effort into developing him. You know,
no question.
Nice contract for the 55th overall pick.
No question. My only point was, like, if you're really trying to do something to make this work, and I'm not saying people need to take discounts. I don't think it would make a significant difference anyway. He could have taken like a $7 million discount, say, and maybe they could have used like the tax MLE to sign somebody else to help the team.
Well, you know what, though? In his defense, and I'm sure the clutch official counter would be, hey, he offered to take like a 20-some-odd million dollar haircut, and you couldn't get a Klay Thompson or a DeMar DeRozan or a James Harden. All of these guys who, by the way, got significantly more than mid-level money, you couldn't get those guys to come.
But Valanciunas didn't.
Well,
Valanciunas is actually an interesting one because, like, he would have been their starting center, and that would have pushed AD to 4, and that was kind of like a coded message, Jonas Valanciunas. Like, I wonder if AD like ratified that. Oh yeah, that sounds really good.
Well, in any event, I just found that entire analogy very amusing, and I would say, for whatever it's worth, LeBron has been in an amazing mood the past couple of days. He seems very happy to be here, part of Team USA, and playing with these guys and hanging out.
This is the championship he can win this year.
There you go.
And it won't be easy. Though if they're favored, and all that stuff, but it won't be easy. And people like, one of the topics on Get Up and First Take in recent weeks, months is, have LeBron, like every day we get this question asked to us by the producers. Have LeBron and Steph won their last championship? And I always answer the same thing. No, they're playing for one this summer.
There you go.
Which is which undercuts it, but that's kind of my point. This is the one they can win. And so that's why they're here. And Steve Kerr made a joke that Steph Curry's golf game is really going to suffer. Steph's an elite summer golfer. He won that chair.
He's an elite golfer, period. He ain't just an elite summer golfer.
That's true. You don't stay in that kind of form if you're not playing year round.
He ain't any Austin Reeves.
Well, in an amusing moment, as he was walking out of the media scrum today, he started getting asked about Reno, the Tahoe celebrity
the Pro-Am. Yeah.
He picked Barty Fish to win, the former tennis player. It's an interesting off-the-board selection. And somebody said, "What about Austin Reeves?" I think it was Wojcicki tried to say he's made the claim he's the best golfer, and Steph sort of politely scoffed at the notion of that and walked out, which was fun.
Wojcicki's going to be carrying his bag, so that's the one to ask.
That is certainly true. But I did enjoy
Austin
that.
Is I played in front of Austin last year in Abu Dhabi. He is with Team USA. He is an excellent player, but Steph is on a different level. Steph like shoots under par in pro events, pro level events. I mean, Steph could
try to play on the Champions Tour for sure,
without question. He absolutely could. But he's not going to be playing golf much the next month because Team USA is getting serious, and the Warriors had some business to deal with here. Bontemps, Kerr, and Steph both speaking for the first time since losing Klay Thompson. Klay will think you'll be busy on Tuesday morning,
Mhm.
MacMahon. I believe the Mavericks hosting Klay Thompson on Tuesday. And I'm sure he'll have something interesting, similar, probably even to say. But Steph and Kerr are both. Would you go so far as to say they were emotional? What would you say they were?
I would say that Steve was very pragmatic about it. Um, he obviously is very good at these things. His EQ is off the charts. It's why he's been such a great coach. He sat down on Saturday, gave basically a 3-minute speech about how great Klay is, and talked to clearly they'd all. I mean, the thing that I think we all sort of knew, but it's like been ratified by what all these guys have said, is they have all talked about this a lot, and like they're all very comfortable with how this ended up, and there's no bad feelings. Like I've compared this to the Ray Allen thing a couple times. The very clear difference here is while Klay obviously I think is frustrated with the Warriors, like in general, in some respects, he's not doesn't seem to have any issues with Steve Kerr. Doesn't seem to have there's clearly no issues with him and Steph or him and Draymond. Like those guys all, I think, left this in a good place. And the message from both Steve Kerr and Steph Curry was that they are eternally grateful to Klay, and Steph flat out said, I just want him to be happy. But Steph was bummed out. I mean, he said on multiple points that it sucks that he's not playing with them. And Steve pretty much pointedly said, I'm a realist. I knew that this was never going to end with, everybody riding off
Yeah,
into the sunset.
Kerr was on the Bulls. Kerr was in the Last Dance. I mean, he certainly understands it.
And I asked Steve about that specifically. Like, does your experience with that sort of help you in this situation? He said, yeah, I've been through this before. But Steph said the exact opposite and was basically looking down the whole time he was answering the question this afternoon when I asked him. He was like, yeah, look, I always thought we would go out together, and it sucks that we're not. And, I think
yeah.
No, he's clearly happy for Klay that he's in a situation he's happy in, but he's bummed out that he's not there anymore. And it just was sort of palpable to hear him talk about it that way.
There's a certain segment of the population who believes that if Steph didn't want Klay to leave, that he wouldn't have left.
Well, and just one thing just to bring up that it was interesting. I didn't see this, but somewhere, and I don't know who reported it, but it was asked to Steph, is it true that Klay asked you to not lobby the Warriors to keep him there? And he sort of shrugged and said, yeah, but it doesn't mean I listened to him.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, Ramona and Kendra reported that as well.
So it was in Ramona's story? Okay.
As well as the folks at The Athletic. Look, man, it's tough when you have that much success and that much, emotional and sweat equity with somebody, and it just reaches a point where Klay Thompson was miserable in Golden State. And, the way somebody explained it to me is, hey, he was miserable making $43 million last year. Even if they'd have come back and outbid the Mavericks, like if he was miserable making 43, he'd been miserable making, 20, 25, whatever the number would have been. And it just reached a point where Klay Thompson decided, I've got to get a fresh start. And then the question was where? And obviously the answer was Dallas. It will be interesting on Tuesday morning. Obviously, look, I've got to ask about his emotions after 13 years and closing that chapter. It will be interesting to see how much he kind of opens up about leaving Golden State, or how much he just says, you know what, I'm in Dallas now, and just tries to move forward. But look, this isn't Ray Allen in the sense of nobody wonders whether Klay Thompson's going to be invited to the reunions.
Right.
Road. Like he
would
be
Ray Allen was at Game 5.
Oh yeah,
well, he is. Yeah,
it was noteworthy.
Yeah.
Well, Ray, I believe, is on a bit of a campaign to get that number retired at this point.
And they've already announced that Klay's number 11 is going to be retired.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing. Like, it is palpable how much everybody, I think, is on the same page here, and I think understands that it was the best thing for Klay and probably the Warriors too for this to go this way. But it was just interesting to see Steve, who is obviously has been through a few of these, be able to take sort of a 10,000 foot view of it. And Steph still quite clearly was in a different place, which obviously, like, I could totally understand where he's coming from. And it wasn't with any sort of malice at all. It just was like, you know, he was just very
listen,
much
the Warriors
bummed
came
out
back
about
from that. They signed Buddy Hield for less than the mid-level. They signed Kyle Anderson for less than the mid-level. Both
They
of
essentially
them.
traded Klay Thompson for Kyle Anderson and Buddy Hield because they signed
Right.
him with the trade exception that they got
No,
out
they
of that
did.
deal.
They were part of the record-setting 16.
That's true.
Yeah,
It was all
I'll
the
go
same
over
deal.
that in a little while. I'll go over all the details from that. But both of them got 2-year contracts at less than the mid-level. The third year of both is either non-guaranteed or partial guarantee. You know, and they're in position to maybe make a mid-season trade too. So the Warriors just didn't just sit on their hands. But
by the way, I think they actually got fairly significantly better potentially with the way this went. Now, it's a big if with DeAnthony Melton's back in particular. If DeAnthony Melton is healthy, he is an elite 3-and-D player. 40% three-point shooter, terrific guy guarding ones and twos. He could sort of be poor man's version of what Klay used to be when he was the guy that guarded ones and twos. And what I'm not saying he's Klay Thompson, but a poor man's version of what he used to be.
yeah, when you say you lose Chris Paul and Klay Thompson, it's like, oh my God, devastating. And then you say, well, but look at the players they got and what they can produce. It, you know, statistic for statistic, they might be ahead. Whether or not
and also, as you've pointed out repeatedly, if Draymond Green cannot be suspended this year again, big if, that they should be able to win several more games just on that alone.
So kind of like the last big free agent on the board got taken off over the weekend, DeMar DeRozan agreeing to join the Sacramento Kings in a sign and trade. The Bulls finally have waved the white flag and begun a rebuild, which we'll talk about in another podcast. But we certainly have thought they should have been doing that a long time ago, and it functionally happened to them. They didn't land on the rebuild. The rebuild landed on them. But that's neither here nor there. It's for another time. But the Bulls helped and sent DeRozan out there. I'm not sure how good of a fit. I mean, the headline is amazing. They're playing a California Classic Summer League game in the Golden One Center on Saturday night. He shows up with De'Aaron Fox, gets a new announce to the crowd. That was a great moment. You'd rather get to see that kind of stuff in free agency. I'm not sure about two things here, MacMahon. One, I'm not sure how good the fit is, like for the Kings, you know, of all the options they had to go all in on DeRozan. And I'm not sure what the Spurs are doing, basically enabling this trade and taking Harrison Barnes.
Well, I'll get to San Antonio in a second because I actually really like what they did this summer.
All right.
And then look, I think with the Kings, it's just an addition of talent. And, you know, they felt like they needed they needed more juice. They needed a talent boost. And then you kind of figure out the fit later. But, and the thing about DeRozan he's a guy he's been a tremendously productive player for a long, long time. There's been no drop off. I mean, this is the guy who is going to be a top 30 scorer pretty early next season. And the question is just how much does he raise the ceilings? I think he raises floors. How much does he raise the ceilings of teams? And,
agree.
You know, that's always going to be the question. Obviously, Toronto traded him to get the, you know, centerpiece of the team that won a championship. He hadn't won big in San Antonio. Obviously didn't win much at all in Chicago. You know, he is one of the great clutch scorers in the league right now. Well, so is De'Aaron Fox, and they're not going to rank 1-2 in clutch scoring, I don't think. And then just he's a guy who doesn't space the floor, doesn't need the ball. So, you know, I hear what you're saying as far as fit, but I think also when you're the Sacramento Kings, you know, beggars can't necessarily be choosers, and this is not their neighbor over in the Bay Area, or you know, the Lakers down south a little bit, where it's
but they had assets. They were involved in 3 or 4 players, and they chose DeRozan. They could have gone 3 or 4 different ways. They chose DeRozan. They had some assets to do something.
Was it bird in hand?
Yeah,
you know?
I mean,
I would say that they they did give up this unprotected future swap, which obviously could be a potential concern down the road, but they didn't trade any firsts in the deal. They still have a bunch of flexibility going forward. And look, like all teams are not in equal situations, and all teams are not shooting for the same things, right? And like, let's just be honest about where the Sacramento Kings are. You have De'Aaron Fox, you have Domantas Sabonis. You have a very good team. You're not winning a championship with De'Aaron Fox and Domantas Sabonis. That's totally fine. For me, the Kings were a disaster for almost 20 years. Now they've had a good team back-to-back years. They get Mike Brown extended this summer. De'Aaron Fox has not extended this summer. He's up for an extension this summer, and he could extend again next summer. If he doesn't extend next summer with 1 year left on his deal, you have to then start wondering, what is De'Aaron Fox going to do going forward, right? You get DeMar DeRozan. Yes, I agree. He is not raising their championship ceiling. But if this team now gets back into the top 6 in the West and makes the playoffs again next year, it's a lot like what Dallas has been doing with Luka Doncic, right? If you get De'Aaron Fox signed up going forward, again, different levels here, these guys. But for a team that has had no success for a long time, I think this gives them a better chance of being a playoff team for the next couple of years, which is not an insignificant thing.
Making the playoffs in Sacramento is a massive success. This is the franchise that had a playoff drought old enough to drive that they just snapped a couple of years ago. Last year, competitive, got bounced in the play-in. But if they get back in the playoffs, you're in the playoffs 2 out of 3 years, your fan base is fired up. If they're a competitive, entertaining playoff team, that's a successful season in Sacramento. So I get it from that standpoint. I do want to hit on San Antonio, though. I actually like what the Spurs did this summer in the sense of I think they've put in a couple of veterans who are going to aid the development of the young guys in the roster in Chris Paul and Harrison Barnes.
Those are two guys who have good reputations.
Consummate pros. I mean, coach on the floor type of guys are going to be great for the young dudes off the floor, all those kind of things. I think they'll both embrace the mentor aspect of the job. They're also, they're not the guys they used to be, but they're going to fit in and they're going to help the Spurs be competitive next year. And I think that's critical for the development of
how competitive are they going to be?
I think the Spurs could sniff around the play-in mix in the West next year. I think they could.
I said this the other day before they acquired Barnes, and I'll say it again now. I use the word semi-bluff. I think it's a semi-tank. Because
I definitely think it's a semi-tank. I think this has been an ingenious tank, frankly, because I don't think Chris Paul and Harrison Barnes are doing much at all to change their win-loss total. I don't think this team is going to be very good at all. And I think for a team that is still growing, is still adding future assets, and is still looking at a loaded 2025 draft, getting another top 5 to 7 pick in this draft is the smart thing to do. And by getting Chris Paul and getting Harrison Barnes, you could say to Victor Wembanyama, hey, man, we're getting experienced guys. We're getting guys who know how to win. We're getting guys that can help you. And they're not going to hurt the Spurs, but they're also not making up the gap between 22 wins and,
and like
45
Hold on. You know one way to make up the gap? Bump Vic's minutes up a little bit. When he was on the floor, especially in the second half of last year, they were a competitive team. Okay, don't tell me what their record was.
I mean, their record for a very large stretch of the season, even when Victor was playing awesome, was awful.
Their top 3 most used lineups last year were all plus net rating lineups.
In the last quarter of the season, if they either won or almost won every game. I got you. They are a 34 win team and a 22 win team.
I'm not. No.
But let me just say this. What did they do with the 8th pick? They traded it. Like, this is a team that could have gone super young, drafted 4 and 8, played Stephon Castle, ton of minutes rookie year, played whoever you take 8, ton of minutes rookie year with Vassell and Wembanyama, taking your lumps and then going into the draft. So they didn't. They've sort of split it
Yeah.
cashing in for the future. And I think
keeping all their asset powder dry.
Right. So they're exactly right. So Barnes has 2 years on his contract. Chris Paul signed 1 year on his contract. And they've come out of the summer with more assets than they went into it with. They trade for 2 firsts from Minnesota, or was it a first and a swap?
First and a swap.
First and a swap from Minnesota, and to get a swap from Sacramento. They come out holding more assets and looking at Victor going, we're better, with a little wink and a smile, with maybe Harrison Barnes and Chris Paul available at the trade deadline.
Well, and Barnes can be a human trade exception next summer.
I'm saying. Or he can be a human trade exception at the trade deadline.
But you know what? The other thing is, if the Spurs do make a leap and they are a competitive team, they're a 40, 42 win team, whatever the case.
Okay, again,
they still might be a top 5, have a top 5 pick.
Well, they're not going to have a top 5 pick if they have 42 wins.
Sure. They don't just have their own picks.
Yeah,
I mean, they have Atlanta's pick, but Atlanta's not going to be. I think Atlanta's going to be somewhere in that same ballpark too, because they're clearly not blowing their team up. And also, again, it is worth pointing out,
Atlanta traded one of their best players and ended up with the number 1 pick this year.
Well, sure, yes, they traded DeJounte Murray. I don't know how much that deal's actually going to make them worse next year. They still have Trae Young. They still have a bunch of other decent players. Also, it does bear repeating. The end of the season, a lot of teams are not trying to win. The Spurs played hard to the end. They also were a legitimate 22-win team. The idea that they're going to go to 42 or 44 wins and as loaded as a conference as the Western Conference is, this is not me saying anything negative about Victor. I think he's incredible.
He's never said anything negative about Victor.
I never do. That's just a huge gap to make up.
Still extremely early in the process. France has played a couple of exhibitions, Team France, and blasted them. Victor has blasted them. They're starting Embiid Gobert and Victor together, and they're running them in pick and rolls.
Yeah, it's great. It's going to be awesome.
Good.
I'm very excited to see how it looks.
Yeah. Okay, so all the contracts got signed. I went through all of them and made some notes that I think were interesting. And we'll just go through these, and you guys can comment or not, whatever. First off, Jason Tatum in his new contract signed the first deal that includes a $70 million season. His 2029-30 season is at $71.4 million. It's also a player option, which means if things go well, he'll probably opt out of it and sign for like 80 with the way the cap is going. Pascal Siakam, he got that 4-year max from the Pacers. No player option, no trade kicker. That's interesting because some of the guys who did get player options, including Max Christie. When I was a kid, when I say that, it means like when I started covering the league.
Before Max Christie was born.
Like LeBron got a player option. Kobe got a player option. Shaq got a player option. Not the 7th man, which is now routine. Not the minimum player. Max Christie gets a 4-year, $32 million contract and gets a player option.
12th man.
I mean, what are we doing here? Like, by the way,
was he not going to sign the 4 years, 32 without the player option? That's the thing.
Like, even if he hits the jackpot, even if the Lakers' brand new developmental system machine churns out a great player, he gets to opt out. Why would you do that? By the way, I'm not criticizing Max Christie. God bless you, young man. Congratulations.
Hey.
What I would say though, I don't think it's good negotiating either, but to me, what that says is the Lakers were concerned about Max Christie getting a hefty offer this summer as a restricted free agent. And so they got him off the market before free agency began. And by doing so, they gave some stuff back. I don't know if I would have expected him to get one.
Cool.
I'm just saying that
he was a restricted free agent.
I just find that interesting. I agree with your stance on the player option for him.
Patrick Williams, another restricted free agent from the Bulls.
Oh, Lordy.
$90 million guaranteed over 5 years and a player option. Player option for Patrick Williams. Why?
Because you know what the Bulls love doing? The Bulls love doubling down on their own mistakes. They did it on the Vooch contract last year. They did it on Patrick Williams this year.
They also love losing negotiations, which they did here too.
Hey, not trying to the deal.
Jonathan Isaac, the contract says 5 years and $84 million with the Magic.
Yeah.
But they basically gave him almost no protection. They added money to this year's salary, the renegotiation. I think it was like 7 or 8 million they added to this year's salary. So that was money he wasn't going to get. So he definitely gets that. He gets next year's salary. And then after that, only the third year is only half guaranteed, and the final 2 years are non-guaranteed.
It's a wide receiver contract. It's like an NFL contract where it's a pay-as-you-go type of thing.
Right.
This is a guy, by the way, Jonathan Isaac, just because I looked this up the other day. He's played 209 or 10 games. I have to look up the exact number. I believe it's 209 games in his NBA career. He's been in the league for 7 seasons. 205, actually. And 58 of those 205 games were played this past season.
That's why he got that type of contract.
Which is why he's got that contract.
Speaking of the Magic, Franz Wagner gets the full max, which was like, whoa.
I love that. It's a potential super max. It's like, this guy's maybe a top 50 player in the NBA. He ain't going to be all NBA. So like, oh, great. Potential
question.
Super max. Awesome.
Did Franz Wagner get a player option?
The answer is yes to that, I believe.
No, he did not get a player option.
Oh, no.
There you go.
Couldn't remember. I thought he did.
Because it's ridiculous.
Well, what's he making last year? The deal he's making like 50 some odd.
$51 million.
Not the point. It has to do with your negotiating position. Isaiah Hartenstein with the Thunder, third year is a team option, $28.5 million team option. It starts high and goes down.
We knew that before. The one other thing, real quick, about the Magic, just because you skipped by it. Jalen Suggs, who was with the select team and was working out extensively, which I'm on mostly today before I talked to him about Cooper Flagg, he is also extension eligible this summer. And I am very curious to see if and what that number comes in at, especially because I would not have given Franz Wagner a full max extension. I'm a very big Franz Wagner fan, but I would have tried to push that number down a little bit, particularly coming off a year where he shot 29 or 30% from three. Very curious to see where that Jalen deal winds up at if they get one.
Yeah. No, you can be a big fan of the guy and pay him less than $45 million a year.
Well, that's the thing. The other players in this draft class, 2021 draft class, were up for extensions. They were very happy to see Franz Wagner get it. I don't know how the Cavs don't give Evan Mobley the max now that Wagner got the max.
I would very simply, because you don't have to negotiate up what the Orlando Magic do. That's why.
Good luck.
I'm not saying that works, but that's not my. If I was the Cavs, that wouldn't be my negotiating position. Well, since the Magic did something, I'll do it.
Well, if I'm Evan Mobley, it is max with the super max kicker. Should the All NBA thing happen? Probably won't, but hey, or nothing.
Right. That's what Chandler Parsons said, and we all learned a lot about it from you. Thank you. Jonathan Kuminga, he's going to want a bunch of money. Jalen Johnson, all these guys. Not that Kuminga and Jalen Johnson are max players, but if Franz Wagner maybe would have gotten like 85% of the max, and they may have like slotted in at like 75% of the max.
Look, Alperen Şengün. There's a bunch of there's a bunch of very good players in this class that were sort of, you would think, sub-max players, and Franz Wagner was probably near the top of that group. And he got a full max. So, it'll be interesting to see how the rest of it goes.
And the Rockets seem to be willing to use restricted free agency, which for whatever reason is a rarity these days. Like, teams just do not let guys get to restricted free agent. At least they're.
I know. A lot of times they give out the fun max. Franz Wagner got a fun max, but we're not in fun max land anymore. In the apron.
Well, I do think it's worth pointing out, because we're, man said, oh, you're just paying a guy $45 million. I do think we need to just remember that this is still the fun max. It's still 25% of the cap, despite the fact that the number's bigger.
That's true.
And also, over the life of these deals, the cap is supposed to grow much larger or much faster than the contracts will. So
I agree.
That's just something to at least consider as you
I agree,
think about
but
these numbers, because the numbers are huge.
I agree, which is why I would suggest locking the number in, not tied to the cap. But that hasn't happened in 10 years. Klay Thompson did that 10 years ago. The Hawks created the way the Hawks structured that DeJounte Murray trade with the Pelicans. The Hawks created a $25 million trade exception. I don't see them necessarily using it now because they're up against the tax, but keep that in mind for down the line. And then real quick, the trade that was involving Klay Thompson ended up being the largest trade in NBA history in terms of teams. 6 teams, the first ever 6-team trade
20% of the league.
Between the Hornets, Mavericks, Nuggets, Warriors, Timberwolves, and 76ers.
Yeah, I was disappointed because it could have, with 6 teams, it could have had every division touched. But the freaking, what was it? I think the East Central screwed it up. The East Central was not involved in this.
There was a triple sign and trade with Klay Thompson signed and traded, Kyle Anderson signed and traded, and Buddy Hield signed and traded. There were 5 total players in the deal. Reggie Jackson was in the deal, and Josh Green were in the deal going to Charlotte. There were 6 second-round picks traded, no firsts, 6 second-round picks, 1 swap, and $1.2 million in cash.
And basically what it is it's a bunch of different deals that just got tied together. You know, I mean, like obviously the Reggie Jackson salary dump happened on draft night, but then it doesn't become official. And then for, you know, cap reasons and CBA minutia reasons, all these things get tied together. And like, look, the Tim Hardaway Jr. trade to Detroit was directly related to all this, but that just went down as a separate deal.
All right, Bontemps, thanks for taking over Team USA this week. You got a lot more work in front of you, culminating in a game, on Wednesday between Team Canada and Team USA, which is actually going to be a great game, which should be appointment viewing in July. I can't imagine there being a better sporting event going on that night. Oh, is it the All-Star game? I don't know if it's All-Star game.
It'll be the WNBA All-Star game, I believe, is in a couple weeks. But
I think the MLB All-Star game is, well, maybe it's in 2 weeks, whatever.
Yeah, I don't know. That's sometime. I don't know when it is. But yeah, it'll be an interesting week. Team Canada, I think, gets into town on Monday. Going to see them, I believe, practice Monday night. And curious to see Jason Tatum get into town. Haven't talked to him since the Celtics sale news came down, and since he obviously got even richer with this massive extension that he signed. And we'll see if Kevin Durant practices. We'll see what the Team USA looks like. LeBron James will be starting. I don't think there's any question about that. And we'll see what else.
There goes that controversy.
Yeah, there goes that controversy.
Yeah, there's actually a real conversation to be had about who Team USA will start, but that'll be for a later day than all this.
I think we'll start to find out potentially on Wednesday.
And MacMahon, no Olympics for Luka. Giannis got him on Saturday, eliminated him. Greece wins the Olympic qualifying tournament. Giannis was in tears qualifying for the Olympics for the Greece for the first time since 2008.
Hey, Puerto Rico's back in it for the first time since 2004. Congratulations to the Boricuas. I kind of had adopted Bahamas. I enjoed that team.
Our guy Chris DeMarco, Warriors assistant coach, done a phenomenal job building that team up. I watched the whole game today. They played in Valencia, Spain. They won twice in Argentina last year to get into this tournament. They get to the final. They just couldn't hit any threes. Got within 6 late. Couldn't quite get it done. Spain, huge favorite, obviously at home. Rudy Fernandez, Sergio Llull, all these guys who've been in there 1,000 times. They win. They go to the Olympics. But I just wanted to shout out the Bahamas because they've had a heck of a run to get even to this point.
Yeah, hey, 3 proven NBA players, and the guy that you would take off that roster right now and certainly for the future, VJ Edgecombe, going to Baylor.
Another guy.
You see why he's considered a top 5 pick in next year's draft.
Yes, we talked about Cooper Flagg earlier. He's another guy in that loaded 2025 draft class.
Yeah, my friends who are scouts aren't 100% sold that Cooper Flagg is going to be the number 1 pick next year. And that's not a commentary on Cooper Flagg. That's a commentary on the quality of the class. But that's all for another day, which we will be talking to you about in the coming days and certainly next week. Thank you again for watching the Hoop Collective. Thank you to Jackson and Adrian, our producers. Thank you to Bontemps and MacMahon. Thank you for listening and watching the Hoop Collective. We'll talk to you soon.
Adios, amigos.